hey, I've actually left my government job and this is what I'm doing now. We forget that the wealth of relationships, you actually have to have a plan and you need to take the next safest micro step. That taking the time to sit down and close the gap between intention and impact is going to give you better outcomes in the long run. You need to learn how to harness your energy for impact, which is something that I learned over time instead of being the bouncing Tigger in the room.
She threw her baby over a fence to save their life. She fought through hell to escape, and yet she became a leader, an entrepreneur, and someone who never let her past define her future. If you're struggling right now, if you feel like success is impossible, Kylie Leota's story is going to change the way you see everything. Let her setbacks into an empire. Please help me welcome Kylie to the show. Hi, Kylie.
Hi, Naya. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here today.
Absolutely. Your story is incredible, and I am so pleased that you decided to share your journey with the audience. I'm not going to start soft with you. In psychology, they say trauma freezes time, and
Yes.
you remember every second, every heartbeat. The difference between survival and surrender, it's one decision, right? Can you take the audience back to that night?
Yeah. So probably probably a month before that, my ex-husband had been admitted to a psychiatric facility. And in Australia, we have voluntary orders and involuntary orders. And he had been placed on an involuntary order, and 10 police officers had come and removed him at that time. That in itself was very, very confronting. We'd been going through hell already. He happened to come out, and that day, when I picked him up, I knew something wasn't right. He was not himself. He was really unsettled. One of his things he used to do is lots of threats. He picked up my 2-year-old son. Oh my gosh. And he was way stronger than me, bigger than me. I was like, what am I going to do? So in that moment, I had the car keys, and I remember just throwing them as far as I could across the road. At that time, he put my son down. I picked him up and I went to the backyard where our neighbors were, and I threw him over a fence. I came back into the house to draw the attention away from where my child was, and things pursued from there. We wrestled with the phone, and he left at one point, and I was able to go. He had broken my phone, so I'd been able to get to the neighbor's house to call the police. I came back to the house. He returned just as two police cars turned up, and they arrested him on the footpath. And the funny thing is, at the time, I was in a high position leadership position. And, it's almost like the movies where you're kind of watching the story and you're going, is this real life? Is this what's happening? And the police had to negotiate with him. He had my keys still, so I had to negotiate my keys to my own house back because he wasn't going to give them to me. And he was subsequently arrested. And in Australia, we have a thing called a domestic violence order. But even in that moment, the police officer had to be the one that still pushed me because I was, oh, what did I do wrong? Why is he like this? And the
Right,
police officer said, Kylie, enough. This has to stop. And the only
right.
way that we can protect you is if we go through this process. Fortunately for me, that did, because once he was released, he wasn't allowed in our presence. And that threat of that was enough for his compliance. Whereas I am very aware that I have the privilege of standing here and telling my story today when so many people don't. I am still here to tell my story. It's one of the most prevalent issues we're facing today, that so many people
Okay.
aren't here to take that. And I didn't get raised in violence, so it wasn't a normalized thing for me. But yet the shame that came with what I was experiencing stopped me from telling people.
Right. It's crazy that as women, we go through so many narratives, so many shifts in our own lives, and we are the ones who go through the shame and the guilt when somebody else is the perpetrator. We train our kids to be so much more fierce in today's world than the way I was grown up. And Kylie, it takes an average of 7 attempts before a woman leaves an abusive relationship for good. You were in that situation. Most people, like you said, cannot make it out of there. Tell me one thing that gave you the strength to move forward after that.
First of all, I really want to help people understand that his behavior was his responsibility, and I take no part of that. But what I also had to recognize, what were the behaviors that I had that made me attractive to people that wanted to take advantage of that. I grew up people pleasing. I like to help people. So in that moment, people like that will always find people like myself that are kind, caring, compassionate. They take advantage because we always see the best in people. And I don't want to be a cynic. I don't want to be a pessimist. I still want to be an optimist that there are good people out there. There's a book called Untamed by the lady Glennon Doyle. And she said, my children don't need me to save them. They need me to watch me save myself.
Love that.
And that was like knife through the heart stuff, because my first question is, what am I modeling for them right now? And I was modeling in that time that I had to accept less than I was worth, and that it was okay for someone to treat me in not very nice ways. I still continue to ask myself, in business and entrepreneurship, what am I modeling right now? Whether that be for my team, whether that be for my kids, whether that be for my clients and my community. If I'm telling my clients to be courageous and do hard things, and then I'm sitting there not doing any hard things, what am I modeling right now? There needs to be alignment between your words and your actions. That is the most authentic version of yourself. So, and subsequently, I left my government job. I didn't want my children to see that they had to accept less than they were worth. And I didn't want them to feel like they had to stay somewhere that they were unhappy because they needed a paycheck. I wanted to model for them that I could problem solve a way out of that allowed me to get the money that I wanted.
I love that so much. For a lot of people, Kylie, leaving might seem like the finish line, but for many, it's just the start of a war. Rebuilding their mindset, their finances, liability, identity. Uh, can you talk a little bit about that aftershock and how to rebuild yourself?
Yeah, so I actually wrote a whole book on it because it was so life-changing for me. I talked about this idea of infinite learning, which is I had to go back and relearn. I had a high-powered job as a woman in leadership, which is already hard, but there were so many things. That identity piece outside of being a mom and a better wife and that job, who was I? What were my values? What were my strengths? And what were the things that made me feel like I was walking in alignment with who I truly wanted to be?
Mm.
I actually think that's one of the hardest questions we can ask ourselves, because everything is outward facing. What do we do for others? So I'm the mum, the leader, the wife. But no. Who are you as a woman? What do you actually value? I can remember going, oh my gosh, my values are so boring. Safety and security was one of the key ones. When I feel safe and secure in that conversation with yourself or with somebody else, I thrive. And I have this different energy about me than if I don't feel safe. And that other part is integrity. And that means that I have to walk with conviction at times about what I believe to be accurate. And as a parent, as a leader, you're going to make some unpopular decisions, but you have to do it with integrity. I'm doing it from a place of positive intention. And that unconditional positive regard that we as coaches give everybody else, I think we have to give to ourselves equally in this journey as leaders and entrepreneurs. And
Right.
that's one of the things that I notice in the work that I do is the people that we are the most harshest on are the ones that are sitting with us all of the time.
So true. I appreciate you sharing this. This is incredible information. Whoever is listening, I hope you're enjoying this conversation. I want to move to a different segment, which is about, building empowering cultures through the trauma and the truth that we all go through. Funny how many companies have mental health days and meditation rooms, but still gaslight employees in meetings. Safe spaces aren't about bean bags and the branded slogans. They're about feeling your voice that doesn't come with consequences. You talk about creating psychologically safe spaces. So, what's something that makes this space look safe but feel unsafe?
Yeah, so I think, I talk a lot about safe spaces for brave and courageous conversations. Like you said, there are a lot of people my big bone of contention is people that tokenistically talk about psychological safety and say that we do a really good job in this. And then when you unpack it, they're not. And we have to be really clear that psychological safety has 4 pillars, right? So it has inclusion safety. I feel like I belong in this meeting, in this room, in this conversation, in this team, in this organization. The next one is it's okay for me to be a learner. Learner safety is I'm going to stuff it up at some point. And some organizations do that really well. Others not so much. The third level is contribution safety. I know that regardless of what happens in this meeting, my contribution is heard, it is listened to, and it is valued. That doesn't mean that I'm going to get my own way, but it means that I have the right to speak up and that I feel like I can. And the fourth part is challenger safety. I can actually disagree with something and I'm not going to be worried about my job. I'm not going to be worried if my boss is going to be upset with me. I'm not going to be worried that I've offsided the team. The outcome of having a psychologically safe environment is to have innovation, have growth, have excellence. And if you're not getting them or if you're feeling stuck, then we've got to keep going back to what are we missing here? It's this idea of continuous improvement. And that means that we have to continue to reflect, review, and recalibrate in an ongoing manner. And I think that's what happens both in entrepreneurship and business, is because we're going through the motions, we're going through this unconscious existing. We forget that we actually have to take conscious actions continually to make these things occur.
That was so beautiful. I loved the psychological and the leadership aspect. It was so well defined. People think inclusivity is about offering opportunities. The truth, it's often about unlearning microaggressions and rethinking the entire system. What's something that neurodiverse individuals wish leaders would stop doing immediately in corporate or coaching environments?
So I think one of the biggest things is assuming that just because my intention is this, that equals the impact, without checking in to see if there's an alignment between what I intended and what the outcome was. Because when you sit there and go, well, I didn't mean for you to be offended by that, you're not taking responsibility for the impact. That's the other part, is people still feel that if we apologize or if we take accountability, we did something wrong, and we get in this linear thinking. But the truth is, I'm not going to get it right all the time. So me going back and saying, hey, Niya, the other day when we had a conversation, I really didn't show up the way that I intended. I'm wondering if I could circle back with you and sit down with you and really try and re-explain what I was trying to say, versus maybe you've been a little bit upset with me since then, or hey, Kylie, the impact of what you said to me the other day really hurt my feelings. And we have to acknowledge that taking the time to sit down and close the gap between intention and impact is going to give you better outcomes in the long run. One of the biggest challenges I see, whether it be with young people that are neurodivergent, whether it be high-powered CEOs, is understanding another person's perspective doesn't mean you need to agree with it, but you need to hold space for it, because that is going to guide where this conversation moves forward.
That's beautiful. This reminded me of a story that I'd like to share with the audience about Temple Grandin.
Yes.
He once said the world needs all kinds of minds. Diagnosed with autism in the 90s, where the world did not hear much about that, she wasn't expected to speak, let alone revolutionize the livestock industry. And if you still don't know her story, let me continue by saying a little more. Her different wiring made her see symptoms others couldn't. She turned what others called a disability into $1 billion impact. Just imagine if we built companies that didn't try to fix people, but built around their brilliance. Neurodiversity isn't a barrier, it's a blueprint for innovation, and we all need to rethink how we look at these people.
For sure. And I was working with a neurodivergent director of an organization for a couple of years. He was really struggling at work. And so he actually asked me to sit in on one of his meetings and just observe. From there, I was able to help him recalibrate his perspective and be more open-minded. And he's since gone on to further promotion. We were able to build a framework for his supervisors to give him feedback moving forward in a way that he didn't feel attacked and take action straight away. And he wasn't emotionally hijacked by the information that was given to him.
Love that story. Parents, if you have a neurodivergent kid right now in your house, remember, don't leave them alone. They live in a bubble, in a different world, and there are people like Kylie who are there to support them through. And Kylie, I've met too many women who've traded their toxic job for a toxic business. The boss is gone, but now the burnout is self-inflicted. And I am a biggest example of that. You're supposed to run your business. I'm not supposed to run you. A lot of entrepreneurs build a business they survive in, but not the one they feel psychologically safe in. So, what's that one red flag that your business isn't safe for you as the founder?
I am a big advocate for creating psychological safety for yourself. And what does that look like for you? We are our own inner critics. What environments am I putting myself in constantly where I feel like I belong? So having a really good ecosystem around you, you're going from being a business leader or a corporate leader to running your own business, you are going to mess it up because you don't know what you don't know. So
Yeah.
learner safety, being kind and considerate to yourself. And if I was talking to my son, would I just say to him, "Oh my God, you're an idiot because you didn't get this right," or would I say to him, "Mate, it's all right. You're just having a go. You're just learning this process. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas." And
Criticism
also,
comes first always, right?
yeah, and being able to challenge my thought, but in a non-judgmental way. One of the things I talk a lot about is around executive functioning for high performance and how our brains actually hijack us. So, and entrepreneurs tell me all the time that one of the things they get stuck in is the highs and the lows, and then they'll burn themselves out. What we're seeing is what's a behavior escalation cycle. So, what does calm look like? And as we move up that scale to, well, how do I know when I'm really dysregulated, when I'm really struggling, when I'm not effective? Because at that particular point in time, it is like nothing is processing in your brain. So
True.
even if you're in this heightened state where you're just on the verge of burnout and you want to talk to somebody, you're not actually processing anything. I worked in a government organization for 20 years where my routine was set for me. I would get up, I would go to work, I would do the thing. And when I started my own business and I got to set my own routine, I was like, what is this nonsense? I don't know how to set a routine because I'd been so institutionalized that it had been done for me. So I had to rewire my neural pathways into planning and prioritization, task initiation, all of these different things that are part of your executive functioning that had been done for me. I don't even know where to start. Some people like to do the snowball effect. They're going to start with the smallest task first and build up to the harder task. Other people need to eat the elephant. They need to really take that big chunk out and start with the big ticket, eat that frog, the big hard job first. But you've got to understand how your brain works rather than just reading all of these different books. And I love reading, but I was turning myself in knots by trying
Mhm.
to adopt everything that everyone said rather than figuring out what worked for me.
I'll say a quick fact. I am going to read this one. Burnout rates among women entrepreneurs have skyrocketed since 2021. Safety isn't just for teams, it starts at the top. So, if everybody understands that burnout is real, we all need to be mindful about what's happening to our bodies and our brains and convert that into a safe space. And Kylie has explained that beautifully in segment one. I want to move on to the currency of resilience, building wealth against all the odds. As studies show, women ask for 20 to 30% less than men when pitching their services, not because we don't believe we are worthy, but because we are not raised not to make people uncomfortable. So let's be honest, why is making money still so emotionally triggering for most women entrepreneurs? I have done pro bono work majority of my life, and it's still a struggle for me to raise my rates. And so I would love to hear this from you.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is everybody has a money story. I mean, everybody. I had very conservative parents that had jobs. My mum worked in a bank. My dad was a welder, but then he became a bus driver, and they had very singular careers. There's nothing particularly wrong with that. Uh, they've had that security. But we grew up with this narrative that money was tight and money was hard. And to be fair, it was when my mum was a single mum before she met my stepdad, and she bought a house, and the interest rates were 16%.
Wow.
Right? So back in the early 80s, things were hard,
Mhm.
but that narrative carries through the decisions that you make. And it's a bit like saying, I'm busy. Oh, that costs a lot of money. All this. The words that we say out loud become our truth. You hear people say, oh, money comes to me with ease. I have never, ever felt that money came to me with ease, ever. I had a narrative that if you worked hard, the money would come. And
Right.
so for me, having to rewrite that narrative that this is where your ecosystem can support you by surrounding yourself with the right people. I remember I'm part of a women's group and I'm talking to my coach at the time about my rates. And she's like, no, you'll raise them. And I feel a little bit of vomit in my throat. And she's like, just put it out into the universe. And do you know what happened? They paid.
Mm.
But had I not been supportively pushed,
Yes.
I would never have. If I put out 10 offers and 2 people accept, then I've got a 20% acceptance rate, and they're the ones that have seen the value in what I do. And then you deliver a good quality service.
Yeah, and going back to what you just said, we all grew up hearing that save your money. But saving isn't how wealthy people get rich. It's investing, taking risk, and learning how to move the scared part of you anyway. So, what's a money rule you had to unlearn to grow your income?
I had a really unconscious belief that money was hard,
Mm.
and it was always something I had to fight for and that I had lack of. I remember after all of my circumstances sitting down and going, I actually have to have a better relationship with my numbers and with my money. And I remember doing my first ever proper budget and crying, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And so I used a couple of different money principles. Every day I had a notebook and I wrote my bank account and money, what my account balance. I was bringing a conscious awareness to my spending patterns, because so much of what we do is tap and go, click, 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 Amazon. We're not even conscious of our spending patterns. It's such a simple step is, and I do this in my business as well. The other part of it is you actually do need to spend money to make money. And
Yes.
so it's about conscious choices. Look at your spreadsheet, understand your profit and loss, and actually ask yourself, is this something I need right now? At the end of last year, I had to upgrade a few different subscriptions. And did it hurt a little bit to have to pay that money? Yes. But it has been the ROI on spending that money. It has been 10x already within 3 months. And at different stages of your entrepreneurship journey, and that is the one tip that I believe has been transformational for me, getting comfortable with money, because my money story was scarcity. And looking at my bank account and going, there is no scarcity here. I can pay for a trip I'm taking my children to Hawaii this year. Something that I would never have been able to do 10 years ago in my circumstances. I've done that without a second income by recalibrating.
You're so inspirational, Kylie. This was such a wonderful advice. I have one more question in this segment.
Sure.
I've seen six-figure entrepreneurs still scared to invest in themselves because scarcity mindset doesn't disappear with more money, it just gets sneakier. You coach leaders. So, what money lie do even high performing entrepreneurs still fall for?
I think the money lie that high level people still fall for is that I can't spend this in case I need it for that. They still have that unconscious narrative. You have to be quite savvy to
Yeah.
get to where you need to go. And we mistake savviness for poor decisions sometimes, because we need a metric and the safe sounding board to go. Warren Buffett, who is the OG of investors, says the best investment you can ever make is in yourself. And if I'm not investing in myself, I can't grow.
Mhm.
And what am I modeling for those around me? What are my children going to receive? What message are they getting that they shouldn't spend money on themselves to improve themselves? Really, one of the things that leaders do is they still feel they have to do it alone. That if you seek help or seek assistance, then you're not the leader that you think you should be. In actual fact, getting that support, getting those safe sounding boards is actually going to make you an even better leader.
Kylie, I have one last question for you. This is so wonderful. I love all the insights that you're pondering. Everyone's screaming start, but let's be real, courage doesn't cover your bills. And you've spoken just now so many great aspects about this money. Where did the first dollar come from? How did you actually fund your business in a world that expects you to bootstrap and go viral in 30 days?
I did my personal tax return, and as a result of my personal tax return, I had a couple of $1,000. It was about $1,000, and I started with, what do I need? I needed a laptop, I needed a phone, and I needed to start working. I didn't have a website. I started contacting people I knew that I had done work for, and just let them know that, hey, I've actually left my government job and this is what I'm doing now. I think we forget that the wealth of relationships and
Yes,
connection.
it's the relationship capital that we talk about, right?
Yeah, low cost, high yield,
Mm-hmm.
and people can't buy from people they don't know exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of time creating messages on socials and things like that, not in a sleazy, salesy way, because I hate sales, but just letting people know what I did and going in and commenting and being of service to others. It was reading somebody having a problem and going, hey, have you ever considered that this is might be your next step? It was actually helping people solve a problem. My business predominantly, still to this day, is word of mouth. And then what were the conscious actions and behaviors that I was doing each day to A, build my brand awareness, and B, serve others powerfully.
So powerful. The best leaders don't just give you the mic, they adjust the volume so your voice is actually heard. Kylie, you're the perfect example of a leader, and your insights are so powerful. I really appreciate you coming on the show. But before we wrap up, I do a very fun segment, which is short, quirky. So it's called the rapid fire. If you're ready,
Sure. Yeah, love
all
to.
right, bring it on.
Bring it
Okay, let's.
on.
One piece of advice for women trying to leave a toxic relationship.
You have more power than you think that you do. And it is around the next, map out where you want to be, and then go back to what's the next safest micro step that you can take to get to the next level. So it's not as easy as just leaving. You actually have to have a plan, and you need to take the next safest micro step, and then just take one micro step at a time. And that's how to get out.
Love that. Biggest myth about success.
That it is the big house and the big car. Earl Nightingale says success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal, and success looks different for everybody. So I think we've got an idea from media what success should look like. But for some people, success is a happy, healthy, safe home environment. For some people, it is a job that they can turn up to that they enjoy every day. For some people, it is $1 million. For some people, it's different for everybody. But it's the progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal. And I think people forget that.
Amazing. Worst leadership advice you've ever received.
It was really along the lines of not being yourself. I don't know if it's obvious to your audience, but I'm an extrovert. And I think people have made extroverts feel really bad about being extroverted. There's a lot of focus on the introverts, and we have to be mindful of our energy. We have to be mindful of our presence. I was almost made to feel bad for the way that my brain processed information, and I need to process out loud. So I think whilst people didn't explicitly say you need to shrink yourself, that was the underlying message of a lot of feedback that I got over time. And that by speaking up and being a really strong advocate was a negative. And I don't think they're either. You need to learn how to harness your energy for impact, which is something that I learned over time instead of being the bouncing Tigger in the room, and understanding that you don't need to shrink yourself for anybody, despite what people might say.
Okay, amazing. Would you rather lose all your money or your business reputation?
I'd lose my money over my business reputation.
If you could go back to the night you left, what would you tell yourself?
That I was stronger than I felt in that moment.
I firmly believe, Kylie, every entrepreneur needs at least one terrible piece of advice they ignored in order to succeed. What's yours?
My one piece of advice that I would give entrepreneurs is that life is an ongoing evolution, and that in order to create infinite opportunities and infinite possibilities, you need to understand yourself and understand what you need in that moment. And that's going to require you to have an ongoing reflective practice without judgment.
Amazing. Last question for the episode. Entrepreneurs often chase revenue but overlook profit. What's the sneakiest expense or habit that silently drains a business profitability?
For me personally, it was employing people that I really didn't need at that particular stage in my business. Entrepreneurship can be lonely, and you
Oh, yes.
think that we're going to do this
Definitely.
together. I burnt myself out because then I was having to work doubly hard to pay their wages. So if you are going to bring someone into your team, first figure out how they're going to value add to your revenue.
Absolutely. Kylie, thank you so much for sharing your journey and inspiring all of us here. Sometimes we need to go through the worst to uncover our true power. And Kylie's story is a proof that pain is not the end, it's the beginning of the most powerful reinvention. If you're someone who's ever faced hardship, or if you're just starting your entrepreneurial journey, take Kylie's story with you. Don't let anything, anyone hold you back from beginning.
Thanks, everyone.